Thank you, my friend. Well, first of all, I apologize for changing the title. The reason why I changed the title was because coming here to Toledo and having the nice collaboration with the group of Fernando Langa on small molecule organic solar cells, I thought it was better to show you examples of molecules that are made here in Toledo rather than the nanocrystals which just make thick. But thank you. But you will see that some of the conclusions and ideas are actually the same as for nanocrystals. And the second is, I would like to thank also Fernando for the invitation. I mean, it's always nice to come and see Toledo. Very flat city, perfect for running, and very warm, like in Tarragona. So Josep and I, we are very happy to be here today. So, when I mean small molecules, there is always people that say, well, all these molecules are small, including polymers, but actually they should be called low molecular weight molecules. And this is kind of the structures that you can find in the bibliography for what people say small molecules. And this is becoming a very important topic. Most of people working in new types of solar cells are just polymers, but polymers have several disadvantages. For example, from batch to batch, the efficiency of the solar cell changes quite a lot because you have to use metals for the catalysis to making the carbon-carbon bonds, and it's extremely difficult to remove these metals from the polymers. And you have to make, for example, a polyaxial thiophene polymer, which is very common, P3HT, and a company tells you, I need a kilogram. Nobody can do this right now in the world. 1 kilogram in a month of P3HT, nobody can do that. However, with the small molecules, for example, this diketopirrol unit here has become very popular now in polymers and small molecules. You can make a kilogram of this in a week. And the impurities here are much less than in polymers. So it has really advantage. So what is the disadvantage of the small molecule? The disadvantage really is that nobody really paid attention to these molecules because the efficiency in a solar cell was very low a few years ago. So in 2009, so 3 years ago, the efficiency of these solar cells was just below 5%. When something is below 5%, nobody cares in the bibliography. You can make a fantastic material which is earth abundant, very cheap. If it doesn't reach efficiencies close to 10%, you have no business in this area. You better move to something else. It came out in 2012, 2 papers from different groups. One group from China, and another group from Santa Barbara, Guillermo Bazán, and they used this core here that they were using for polymers, and also the Chinese people were working in polymers, and they reached 7% and also 7.2% in the text paper for this molecule, and then people start thinking that this is actually a very promising alternative to polymers. Okay? So efficiency when you work in solar cells is almost everything. And what is the idea behind these new small molecules? The idea behind these new molecules is not that somebody come up and say, I have a new idea. No. The idea comes because they look at what Gratzel cells has been doing in the last 10 years. And in Gratzel cells, people has been putting a secondary electron donor, like triphenamine or indolin, a P bridge, and a very good acceptor. In this case, the cyanovinyl group. But you can change this, the donor, you can change the pi bridge, you can change the acceptor, and then you can have this kind of cartoon. And that's what we have been doing in the last year. These all molecules that are in our lab. BC belongs to BJ Chayuri, an excellent postdoc coming from Toyota that is now at ITHIC working in our group and has done all these molecules that are now being checked for solar cells. And all of them, they have this donor, P-unix, acceptor, you see. And what happens is that when you excite these molecules in the UV visible, you have a strong absorption in the visible because you have a charge transfer band from the charge going from the secondary electron donor to the pi bridge. So the HOMO and the LUMO of these molecules are delocalized. The LUMO mainly is in the cyano, and the HOMO mainly is in the indole, or in the case of the people in the triphenamine. And that's very important because if you have the HOMO and LUMO somehow mixed together, this tends to be you have a very good molecule for transistors, but a bad molecule for solar cells. This is the first principle we learned from these molecules. This is more molecules done by Lydia, it's a PhD student, Lydia Cabau, and also Vijay, and we are making all of this. So the first thing when you work on these molecules is always the same question. How I find experimentally where is my HOMO and LUMO levels? In polymers, it's very difficult. You have been working with polymers and you try to make electrochemistry of the polymers, you will find out that to have the ability to find electrochemical ways in polymers is extremely difficult. In small molecules, it's rather easy. You can fully oxidize these molecules and get the HOMO. And if you use ferrocene, you can refer this to the vacuum level, so you can have a good approximation about what is the electronic gap of these molecules, and you have to be very careful with that. The optical gap is always a little bit larger than the electrical gap. And that is important in terms of later how to calculate open circuit voltage on these devices. Some people make very important mistakes in the bibliography, assuming that the optical gap is the same as the electrical gap. The electrical gap is always smaller than the optical gap. Also, these molecules have a strong fluorescence. This is the absorption, and this is the fluorescence. So that is very important in order to check, for example, actually this is the molecule of Fernando's Lange group, and I will tell you a little bit more about that. But the importance of fluorescence is that you can check if all the excitons you form when you mix this with an electron acceptor, usually it's a fluorine derivative, are just split into polarons, or the excitons stays there and they come to the grounded state, and then your solar cell is not very efficient. If you don't have luminescence, then everything becomes much more difficult to quantify. So we have studied in very much detail these molecules with the A dot unit and the two cyano groups, and you can see here the same approach is having this pi bridge, these two strong acceptors. And the important thing in these molecules is that you cannot find many examples in the bibliography when you get a huge voltage. This is over 1 volt. This is among the highest voltage for a solar cell. Silicon, for example, the modules you can buy there, the voltage is around half of this, is 500. The best silicon you can have is 750. Okay? The field factor usually in small molecules is very bad. In this case, it was very good. It's above 60%. The problem is the current. You only get 6 milliamps. And the reason why these molecules works very well, it was very surprising. I mean, most of the bibliography before this paper, they claim that you need to have PP stacking. Okay, because they have aromatic units and people is upset with PP stacking. It turns out that this molecule, this is the crystal structure. This is not modeling, this is actually the crystal structure of the molecule. They do not have PP stacking very strong. What they have is a hydrogen bondings at the cyanos, and that induces a long range order on the crystal. So you can have very good mobilities because you have this arrangement of molecules thanks to the hydrogen bonding, these things that you learn when you study supramolecular chemistry, and that induces very long range order in these molecules, which is rather important. The problem of these molecules is that you only can make very thin films. You see, this is the absorption, and your absorption in a typical film thickness of 40 nanometers is only just 0.3. It is too low. Because a solar cell, the first principle of a solar cell is that it has to absorb as much as light as possible. Okay? The issue with small molecules or with polymer is that if you make it too thick, silicon, for example, is 10 microthick, 10 micrometers. And the reason is because the exciton diffusion, so how far the charges can move in the material, is very long. In organic materials, this exciton diffusion is very short. You only can have 10th of nanometers, 12 nanometers, 15, 9 nanometers. That's why you need to mix them with fullerene. And in this mixture, you have always a fullerene close to the nanocrystals of this molecule in the order of 5 to 6 nanometers. Then the charges can split, and then the polarons can move farther, but not much farther. They only can move, for example, 20 nanometers. So you make the film thick enough with this molecule, then you can absorb much more light, but your efficiency goes down because you have problems with mobility. So the issue with these molecules from Toledo is that the mobility, despite the fact that they arrange very well in the crystal, is too low to make thicker films. Even if the film is only 40 nanometers, you can get 6 milliamps. 6 milliamps of current in a film which is only 40 nanometers is a lot. But you can think also in a very positive way. These cells are transparent. So you could use this in building integrated photovoltaics in the windows. And this week in the news, they were the first building who has incorporated colorful solar cells, using dye solar cells in Switzerland in the building. They have used dye solar cells and they cover all the building with nice and color red, blue, green windows. It's the first approach towards implementing this technology into real market applications. Fluorescence, as I say, is very important. You can see here, this is the molecule by itself. This is the emission. And then when you mix with fullerene, okay, the emission goes down. And the reason is because you quench the excited state of these molecules, and that's good because it tells you that you form excitons. But the question is, these excitons now can do two things. One is they split and form free charges, polarons, or they remain there, which up to 1 year ago people didn't thought that this can happen. They remain there for several seconds, nanoseconds, and they go to ground they go back to the ground state. It is what is called now CT states, just transfer states. And then you need other techniques like laser transient spectroscopy to really check that this decrease in fluorescence emission is not only the formation of CT states, excitons, it's also the formation of free charges, because this is what you want. You want free charges that move and can get collected at the contacts and produce voltage and current. So what is our picture? And this is quite special because we are only the few groups in the world that believe that this is possible, and now we're getting a lot of emails about people that believe that in the last years everything we have said in the papers is true, and some people even get influenced by these ideas to make very good solar cells, including in silicon. The picture is, imagine that you don't have electric fields, because most people in the solar cells field, they came from silicon, and they thought that when you put two metal contacts, you create an internal electric field that has to take apart the exciton. And we said, okay, forget about electric fields. They might be there when you have a metal contact with some organics, but let's think in another way. Let's think you have a photoactive material which absorbs light and can make these excitons. All you need is contacts which has a larger band gap, but have the right offset to extract the charges. And it doesn't have to be extremely pure. They have to be very good selective contacts for electrons and for holes. And actually, there is a guy in the States that applied this idea to silicon, trying to prove us wrong. They got silicon and make much more pure silicon for N-type and much more pure silicon for P-type, and get a result that he didn't expect. They got almost 800 millivolts of voltage. And he wrote an email to me saying, you might be right about that, and it could be that this not only works for organic solar cells, it also could be that this is real for inorganic solar cells. So, to achieve maximum voltage, what you need is to accumulate the charges in the film and split what is called the Fermi level, which is the level where the level below which the charges are stored. And that gives you the voltage, and then if this contact is selective enough, will drive through the circuit the electron and will recombine with the holes, producing the photocurrent. The more charge you can hold in this film for longer time, the more voltage you can have. So this idea about my band gap is only 1.2 volts and then I only can get half of this energy is not true. The theoretical value, because nobody can go against thermodynamics, is that if you have a band gap of 1.2, the maximum voltage you can get is 1 volt. You should not stop until you have 1 volt. Even if your device is at 0.6, it means that what happens is that you have a lot of recombination. You're not able to store charges because they recombine too fast. And people have proved that silicon that has a band gap of 1.3 can now get 800 millivolts. That's a lot. Before they only can get 550. And the reason is because they have passivate the contacts. So with this idea in mind, we did some experiments and this is the classic picture you see in all papers from organic solar cells. This is the anode, which usually is ITO, indium tin oxide. And then the people put a donor molecule, like a squalene, an acceptor molecule, which the only one which works very well is fullerene. But the reality is not that. The reality is that the ethol has a roughness, which is a lot. And you can say, how much is a lot? A lot means nanometers. But your film thickness is only 20 nanometers. So it has actually, it modulates how rough will be your film. Then when you put the C60 on top, if this layer is also thin, you may have an issue, which is that you have recombination sites, or in other words, so you can understand, is that electrons in the C60 go to the wrong contact because it's too rough. Okay? So the real picture is this one, and what you would like to have is this thing here. So what we did was we increased the thickness of the squalene layer from 6 nanometers to 12, and we see an increase in voltage. So we were right. So if we put this layer of C60 farther away from the anode, we can hold the charges for longer because you are avoiding recombination happening, while it's happening as fast as in this kind of devices. And we did that in a very controlled way, putting a very selective contact for holes, which is molybdenum oxide, and a very selective contact for electrons, which is BCP. Okay? And then what we did was to change the thickness, that's why the X is here, of the squalene, and to change the thickness of the selective contact. And you can see in this picture here, you have thickness of 6 nanometers, then you go to 12, you increase the voltage, but when you have molybdenum oxide, after 6 nanometers, it doesn't really matter if you have the contact thicker or thinner, you cannot change the voltage much anymore because you cannot control this recombination. It's happening not in the contact, it's happening at the bulk. So now you have to work with the molecular structure of the donor and the acceptor. And well, this is some physics parameters to, for example, that tells you that the VOC goes linear with light, so it means that you can calculate the N value. It tells you about the number of traps at the bulk, and that's what you want to know. For example, if your device has 9 nanometers, your N value is over 2. N usually has to be between 0 and 1. No, you said? Okay? Yeah, close to 1. And what happened is I'm dyslexic, so I'm very bad on numbers. They have to change all my numbers every time in the papers. So you have over 2, it means that you have a lot of traps. Traps mean defects. Defects means places where electron and holes can go together and recombine. Every time you have a recombination, it's 1 electron less that you can extract and make current and voltage. This is the way we calculate how much charge we have in our device. This is called charge extraction. We developed this in collaboration with Imperial College. For disolar cells, people use for organics, and we use it now for small molecules, and it works fine. It's very easy to understand. So this is what is called the density of states. It's how your charge accommodates, okay, on the states of the molecules. And you see it's like exponential, means that it doesn't depend on the electric field. If it was field dependent, which means voltage dependent, that will be a line like that. The more voltage you apply, the more charges you have, because it's field dependent. But it's exponential, meaning that this is the tail of the density of states. You know, the organic have a density of state which is like a Gaussian, okay? And this is the tail. This is the last part of the Gaussian. The Gaussian will be like that, and you're feeling only these states. You cannot feel more because the more charges you have, the faster is the recombination. The more charges you have, the faster is the recombination. And that's what you have to work on. You have to increase the charges, but making this number slower. And that's why Gratzel has very successful on disolar cells, because they found a way to increase the charges on the titanium dioxide film with a recombination which is millisecond time scale, very slow. And that's why they can make 14%, 13%, and that's why they are close to the market. While you are above 10%, everybody gets very interested, even companies. So you can make a solar cell which is transparent, 10% efficient, you are in business. The only thing is that now you have to make it stable, but this is another issue. Okay, and you can see here the devices with 6 nanometers, they have a very different recombination lifetime. You have a shift in the density of states. It doesn't happen for the thicker one. So some people say, well, this could be due to the distribution of fullerenes in the film. It could be. So what we did was to make two different set of devices, one with more fullerene and another one with the same fullerene. And the VOC didn't change. Okay? So the fullerene small molecule ratio, the number of acceptors you have, does not have an influence on the VOC. It has an influence on the photocurrent, of course, because you put more fullerene, you have more polarons, because you have more ways to split these excitons. Okay? And then we went to physics. Jenny Nelson and Thomas Kirchhoff at Imperial College, and they did some modeling for us, try to explain if what we see is also a change in the work function, because we must make sure that we are not changing the potential at the contact. And they did that, and of course, in a perfect bilayer, it doesn't work. You can see here this A shape. So we never saw A shapes, so it cannot be a perfect bilayer, so we were right. But it doesn't explain also when you have a fully mixed donor, because it doesn't have the same trend. The voltage keeps increasing. And we see that after a while, the voltage doesn't increase anymore. So what we propose is that you have two kinds of solar cell in one. One, which is a perfect bilayer, which is far away from the electrode, and another one which is in the midway between a perfect bilayer and a bucket junction. And when we did this model, it fits perfectly. You know, the squares and the squares are the real data, and the lines are the fitting using this expression, which for those who work on semiconductors is quite classic. This is one diode, and this is the other diode. And then you combine a diode which is limited by Schur combination, so a bilayer. You can fit the 6 nanometer, and if you fit to a perfect bilayer, it doesn't fit. But when you mix both, the bilayer and the bucket junction, you get a perfect fit for any kind of curve you want. So now we really understand how these devices work. And how much time I have, Fernando? Yeah, that is fine. But then that was not enough, because then we understand how the contacts work. Well, we want to know more about how the influence of morphology plays a role on this. And for that, this is the solar cell, so it's quite amazing. You have 4%, 3.5%. People have reported 5%, but this is another issue. I will not go into that. And what we have to do, actually, is to use X-ray. And to do X-ray, people go to the synchrotron. We don't have a synchrotron. We have in Catalonia, but they don't give us much time in the synchrotron in Catalonia. Every time we submit a proposal, they say it's not very important. It's not very interesting, because they want to study more bio things and more catalysis things. So we have to use a conventional X-ray, and you can see a spot. This is a real solar cell. This is not crystals that you get from the molecule. This is a film for a solar cell. You scratch. I think there's a picture here. Yeah, we do it like that. We make the spin coating of the film. We anneal in the same conditions as we anneal the films for solar cells, and then we scratch this, and when we have enough powder, we go to the X-ray in powder, and we see these things. A spot, it tells you that it's highly oriented, it's very crystalline. An arch like that will tell you that your crystals are not very oriented, okay? But they are all in the same plane. So this is the way it is. The X-ray, this is the ITO, molybdenum oxide. It's all complete cells. We do everything in complete cells. You see the peak, which is related to the squaring arrangement. And you see that when you have no anneal, you have no crystals. So you need the annealing to induce the crystal formation, as in the solar cells. This is the packing that we get after we apply a model to the experimental data. It tells us that you have a monoclinic P2 -1 space thing, which is different from what we observed, for example, for the molecule from Toledo, that you remember it was aligned in a very linear way thanks to the hydrogen bonding. They align here in a classical herringbone structure, having one in the middle. So everything gets messy when you go to a more complete solar cell, and then you have to use these models to fit all the peaks, and then do the maximization of the interface. Okay, you get this peaks thing here. But the take-home message is that you can have these very ordered crystal structures, and you can have this arch here, okay? What it's telling you, I will skip this, is that in a solar cell, which doesn't work very well, you have a mix of phases. So the molecule can give two different arrangements. This arrangement and this arrangement. In pristine films, you only have this arrangement because you have no fullerene. You have this weak PP stacking. When you mix the fullerene induces a change in the way the molecule crystallizes. And nobody ever has said that. They always think that fullerene is doing nothing there, just accepting electrons. And that is not true. Fullerene has an energy, has a shape, and induces changes on the way that the molecule arranges and crystallizes. And here is the proof of that. So we have no PP stacking at all, and we have this structure which is the predominant in very efficient devices. So we told this to the guy that published the paper on the squatting, the 5%, and the guy said, oh, this is wrong, because we always have seen this. But that's because they always crystal films without the PCBM or without the fullerene, which makes no sense because you have this molecule when you make the device. So you have to always work in the real conditions. Ideal conditions are nice and easy to understand, but it's not the real world. Okay? So the real world is this, and it's much more complicated because you have all these experiments to do, all these refinements. You have to check all these peaks one by one. So it means that you have to assign all the peaks for the different crystal size, and so on and so forth. So this is I think is the last picture of that. This is the group, which now there's a lot of people leaving. Josep, which is here, is going now as a postdoctoral researcher to the ITQ in Valencia to work with Avelino Merme. Aurelien also is looking for a postdoc. He's the guy who has done all the work on the squatting. BJ is the guy that they make the donor pi acceptor dies. James Ryan is already in Toyota in Japan at the University of Tokyo. Nuria is the girl that did the work with molecules from Langas group. And then Georgiana is working in bio, like Ivan. Who else is involved in that? John Clifford is the guy who takes measurements of complete devices. And Lydia is the one that do also disolar cells, the dyes for disolar cells. And Belok is from Malaga and is starting working on quantum dots and perovskite. And if you have any question, I'll be more than happy to answer them.